the Bookotarian here for another video. Welcome back to my channel. One being G from Book Roast. Her magical readathon is back and it's better than ever and non-Harry Potter related, thankfully, because I would have had a hard time getting behind the readathon had it stayed being what it was. So it's a whole new revamped fantastical world, very atmospheric and Dungeons and Dragons kind of a vibe for a readathon. Anyways, so I'm really excited about the magical readathon, and Becca from Becca and the Books is hosting another month-long round of Bookopolathon. Thankfully, G's readathon is a very minimalist requirement of reading 2 prompts and books to go with that, so I should not have too much of a problem balancing the amount of books that I'm reading for each one, and I have my character picked out of the list of species you can choose from for the magical readathon. So I'll start off with the magical readathon, which is the easiest one to explain in the shortest amount of time. And for this first round of the month of September, you're essentially just establishing your character that's going on this journey and going on the journey. So first you have to decide what species you want your character to be, and I chose Earthling just because I thought Earthlings in general were so unique and not a species that I've generally heard of a lot in fantasy before, so I liked that premise of it not being the same like elves, dwarves, humans, mages, whatever. I liked that it was different, so I just went with Earthlings. And coincidentally enough, the prompt for that species is elemental. Like, the book is set in a big elemental, like, I don't know, it's surrounded by a lake or something, or magic is heavily tied into elements. That would count. I said that really weird. Elements. If it's heavily tied into elements, then that would count as well. And if you need any recommendations, I have plenty, because I love elemental magic in fantasy books. The book I'm reading for this prompt is The Will of the Empress by Tamora Pierce. If you haven't watched any of my previous TBR videos, you may not know that I'm rereading and now reading for the first time all of the books in the Circle of Magic quartets by Tamora Pierce. And The Will of the Empress is the first book in the 3rd quartet that I have not read yet. So it'll be the first time reading the first 3 books of that quartet. So if you don't know, the first book follows the 4 main characters, Briar, Daja, Sandry, and Triss. So it follows those 4 main characters as they are, for some reason or another, cast out of their previous living situations. Sandry is a nobleborn whose parents died of the plague. Briar is on his last strike with the law because he's a street urchin and a member of a gang and got caught 3 times and is about to get sent to, like, the equivalent of jail for minors. And Triss is kind of the problem child of her family. She's been passed around from family member to family member because nobody knows what to do with her. And Daja is the last survivor of her family, who are traitors, and it's a big no-no to be the last survivor of a ship that sinks. It's considered very bad luck, so she's labeled a Trankshe and kind of exiled from her people. So they all kind of have nowhere else to go, and when this mage called Nicloran Goldeye comes to them and offers to take them away to Winding Circle Temple and be students there, essentially, they're all like, well, we can't exactly say no. They end up at Discipline Cottage, where they are under the care of Lark and Rosethorn, 2 other dedicate mages that kind of help them mature and come to the realization that they have magic, and just basically them becoming really impressively badass mages. Right, so the first entry level for the journey aspect of this readathon is basically pick a book that's on your TBR. And so for that one, I'm doing the Master's Edition of Fairy Tale Volume 3. This is Volume 3, right? Yes, it is. Okay, just thought I'd make sure. And if you don't know what, it's by Hiro Mashima. So if you don't know what Fairy Tale is about, it follows the main character Lucy, who is a celestial wizard, which means she can summon celestial spirits through their gate keys to help her out in situations in which she might need it. And she is looking to join a guild and become a official wizard, because you aren't considered a wizard until you've joined a guild. It's a whole thing. So one day after, this boy named Natsu, who has spiky pink hair and fire magic, and his good old friend Happy, the flying, talking blue cat, happened to save her from a plot that would have gotten her into a lot of trouble and bring her back to the Fairy Tale Guild, in which she becomes an official member, which is a really good plus for Lucy because she loves the guild Fairy Tale. It is very well known, kind of infamous guild, but was her number one choice for a guild to join, so she's very pleased about this. And it follows specifically Lucy and Natsu for the most part and their adventures in the Fairy Tale Guild. So those are the only two prompts that I have planned for reading for the Magical Readathon. I usually do 6 draws of my TBR bag, so I just decided to stick with that number for Bookopolathon, even though I am also reading 2 books additionally to that number as well. So I rolled the dice 6 times, and the first prompt space I landed on was Monster, and the book I chose for this is another manga, Fruits Basket Collector's Edition Volume 7. It's a pretty chunky one, not nearly as big as Fairy Tale, which is like over 1,000 pages long. It's a manga, but it's still a lot of pages. Like I said, it's a literal brick. But the author is Natsuki Takaya. If you don't know what Fruits Basket is about, it's another fairly popular anime as well as manga. But it follows a young high school girl named Toru Hunda, who has kind of been semi-evicted from her home. So she basically just camps out in the wild while all these renovations are happening. And one day she goes exploring before school because she has time to kill before she needs to go. And she stumbles across a house that she didn't know was there before, and it turns out that it is one of her most popular classmates, his house, and his name is Yuki Soma. And she discovers a secret about the Soma family, that some of their family members are cursed by the zodiac spirits, and they can turn into the different animals of the zodiac. And 3 such members of the zodiac live in this house that Toru stumbles across, so she finds out their secret, and the story takes off from there. So the second roll I actually got was a chance card. It was a chance card. And I got The Toll by Neil Schusterman. I want to kind of wrap up as many series as I possibly can before the year ends, so I don't feel like I'm just drowning in a bunch of unfinished series when I start the new year. So finishing this trilogy will be a pretty good way to go about it. The first book, Scythe, follows Rowan and Citra, who are in this futuristic world, in which case death is just not a thing. You don't die from disease, you don't die from hunger necessarily, you don't die from accidents or any kind of like murder. If someone were to come up and slit your throat, you can just be revived. And the only way people can actually die and to keep the population down, these things, or these people who take on these careers as scythes, are the only people who are allowed to murder, but they call it gleaning. So they essentially keep the population under control by picking people they think should be gleaned for the sake of keeping everything manageable. First letter of the last letter. So you pick a book that it starts with the last letter of the last book that you chose. So obviously The Toll ends in L, so I had to go with Lore by Alexander Bracken, from most looked forward to not exactly all that thrilled. And I think this is supposed to be about this kind of game in which the Greek gods are still around. However, they're kind of dying out, as every year or so there is this big Olympic kind of grand games in which the gods are sent down to Earth in mortal bodies and are basically hunted down by demigods or humans for fun. And I think if humans kill one of the gods, they can take their place or something like that. So the second prompt I landed on was history. And for that, I'm going to be reading Last Night at the Telegraph Club by Melinda Lowe. I don't know too much of what this is about, aside from the fact that it takes place in the 50s, and it follows one Asian American of some sort and her girlfriend as they kind of try and keep their relationship a secret, as it is very much not socially acceptable to be dating a woman in the 50s in America, unfortunately. So the next prompt I landed on was a randomize your TBR, so I went to Goodreads and I got number 10, and I don't have a copy of this book that it landed on, but I will be reading Frostheart by Jaime Lidler. Now this is a middle grade novel that is a polar fantasy, and it follows Ash, who is a song weaver, and he has the ability to weave songs and is really good at singing. And his parents are what are called pathfinders. So one of these missions that his parents are going on, they disappear and don't come back, and Ash's community discovers that he's a song weaver, and because he is a song weaver, it is believed that he will get brainwashed by the monsters because he can communicate with the monsters that are terrorizing these people with his song weaving skills, but not a whole lot is known about this magic that he has, so he's cast out and eventually joins this sleigh called the Frostheart and starts to look for his parents. And so the last prompt that I landed on was a hyped book. For that I have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This follows Evelyn Hugo, who is a very famous starlet who is kind of getting on towards the end of her career. She's like in her 50s or 60s or something, and she wants somebody to write a autobiography of her life, essentially. So she hires a little-known reporter to interview her for her autobiography. And those are all the books. Crap, I put Fairy Tale down backwards. I always do this with manga. And Fruits Basket is backwards too. Those are all of the books that I plan on reading in the month of September. Oof. It's a pretty hefty stack, only because Fairy Tale is so obnoxiously ginormous. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I will see you all in my next video soon. Bye.